Kaliks Reborn is the final fight of the Machine Wrath Prison of Elders challenge mode, and it is a mess. Let's go over the fight as it is right now first. Kaliks 12 got pissed off because so many of you were farming Skywatch for treasure keys and killing him so many times, so it evolved into a higher being. Unfortunately, that did not translate into a better fight experience. When you first start the encounter, you have a bunch of Archons, aka major dregs with shrapnel launchers, spawn on both sides of the arena. What their purpose is isn't exactly revealed right away. Kaliks' one mechanic is the following. At every 25% of its health, including right at the very beginning of the fight for some reason, Kaliks will spawn Archons, and then after a certain amount of time, seems to be around 30 seconds, will absorb them as health. Any Archons not killed will despawn and be absorbed by Kaliks, where Kaliks will slowly start to regenerate health. So at the start of the fight, 75%, 50%, and 25% of Kaliks' health, the Archons will spawn, you kill them, or they get absorbed. Around 50% of Kaliks' health, a VIP target will spawn as a critical objective. You must kill this target before it reaches its destination, or you will wipe. It'll be a captain, and it'll spawn out of the first door on the right if you're facing where the boss spawns as you exit the airlock. So what do? It's pretty simple, just start damage on the boss and kill Archons. Archons that are not killed will be absorbed by the boss, and it only takes one or two to restore a lot of the boss's health. Once the Archons are gone, go back to killing the boss and the adds in the area. There's nothing overly complex, nor are there any secrets to this fight. This process will repeat itself at the health points that I mentioned earlier until the boss dies. You can take as long as you want in this process. However, it does only take a couple of Archons to send this boss straight back to full health regardless of what his health is. Note that some people claim that if you damage the boss while the Archons are healing it, it won't regenerate health. This is because you are actively dealing damage to the boss, countering the regeneration of its health. You're not actually disabling the heal, you're just doing more damage than the boss is healing. I don't have any specific suggestions as to where you should stand because as long as you're standing in a safe position, you're fine. My team likes to stand in a couple of different spots. One spot is just around the start where you walk out of the airlock, and another spot is all the way on the right on the platform, like for the Skolas strategy. If you don't have a Ward of Dawn ready, you don't want to be standing near the doorways because the Archons will blow you up super quickly. Archons spawn out of the first door to the left, and the doorway underneath the platform. Now while the mechanic and the concept of this boss fight is pretty sound, the balance is not, at all. What has happened with every boss in Prison of Elders? You can just burn them, and that does not change here. You can just burn Kaliks. His health is so little that it's totally possible to just annihilate this boss before the Archons are even absorbed, and even if they are absorbed the first time, you'll just rip through the boss on the second wave. You could just let the first set of Archons simply despawn. The Archons can destroy you if you try to take them out solo without the help of a blinding Ward of Dawn, and there's a lot of them to take out. The reason I say solo is because they spawn on opposite ends of the arena should you want to split yourselves up. If you let them all spread out across the playing field, it gets even tougher. If you don't have those blinding bubbles, taking out all of the Archons while avoiding their damage, avoiding boss damage, and avoiding all of the other adds can prove to be a little bit difficult or at the very least tiresome. And if you don't get every single Archon, it's basically a wasted effort. So the reason Kaliks' health is so low is because Bungie assumed that with the amount of time its health would regenerate, that the total amount of damage you'd have to do would be approximately equal to a normal boss, which is somewhat true. Yet, Bungie continues to underestimate the power of the people who play their game. Fighting the many Archons is not really the most fun experience in the world either if you don't come prepared with Saint 14 Titans. The amount of time you spend on them is most of the time not worth the time at all because if you miss just one or two, you might as well have missed all of them. Then it's just a waste of time where you could have instead just burned the boss, making this boss essentially a very low health servitor with a yellow eye. Wow, exciting. We end up with a boss with not enough health and too many adds that end up not worth being killed in the first place and can be completely ignored otherwise. The balance is just completely off. So what can we do to make this fight a little more interesting? Well, if Bungie doesn't want people burning bosses, they need to implement immunity periods. Think about it. Templar has an immunity period, Atheon has an immunity period, Crota has an immunity period. Let's ignore the fact that you can still totally burn those bosses anyway for the moment. But they do have immunity periods, where other objectives must be completed before you can truly damage the boss again. I'm not trying to say that every boss fight in Destiny needs to have an immunity period or that they're necessary for fights, but for this fight, it could use one. Specifically at the 75, 50, and 25% health marks on Kaliks. Now we have this mechanic of the adds restoring health to the boss if they're not killed, which is an interesting mechanic to try and fight around. Having them just pour out of the door is kind of boring and wouldn't really work as well as they do now, which isn't me saying that it works well right now because I don't think it does. So let's put a little more pressure on the players while making it more engaging. Let's zazz this up a bit. At every 25% of Kaliks health, the UI will say Kaliks hunts for ether, where then a range of 3 to 5 enemies will spawn randomly out of doorways and start making their way to Kaliks. Their health, speed, and strength would all have to depend. We have some options. The lower the health they have, the faster they move to Kaliks. The more health they have, the slower they might move. It would be your job to hunt down these adds that spawn before they get to Kaliks. If they get to Kaliks, Kaliks regenerates some health along with growing in strength. The next set of adds that spawn at 50% would be stronger than the previous to keep up with the urgency of killing the adds. You could go from dregs to vandals to captains for the 3 waves of adds that spawn. If you wanted, you could have the enemies be different levels as well to have your team prioritize. Of course, me just saying all of this stuff is easy. This is the easy part. The difficult part is in the execution and the balance of the adds. How much damage do they do? How much health do they have? How fast do they move? How much stronger does Kaliks get? I'm not going to try and get into numbers right now because I don't know what would be reasonable. Something like that would require a good amount of trial and error. What I do know is that the balance of this fight is off and it needs to be tweaked if they don't want to make this fight just another burn fight like it is right now. Those are my suggestions for revamping the Kaliks fight to be a little bit more interesting. Right now, it's a bland fight with mechanics that can be ignored and has adds that are generally more threatening than the boss itself, while the boss is in no way intimidating whatsoever. You don't even need to know what the Archons do to beat the boss. Imagine if you didn't need to know what the Relic did for Templar. Imagine if you didn't know that you needed to kill servitors for Skolas. That's what this fight feels like right now. Once again, much like Skolas or Quodron, I'm personally fine with these fights from a difficulty perspective. I don't have trouble with this boss at all. But just because I don't doesn't mean other people don't, and just because I think a fight is capable of being done doesn't mean I can't criticize how it is executed. The only reason I mention this is because in my review of Prison of Elders, I had a few people in the comments say that I was complaining about fights being too hard and that I wanted them nerfed. This is absolutely not the case that I'm trying to argue. Kaliks is a good idea with not great execution. I think this fight needed just a little more time in the oven. That'll do it for me though. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.